30 days eviction notice. That's what the HOA slapped me with for storing guns at my own ranch. I'm a licensed firearms instructor in Texas teaching my daughter gun safety when Patricia Henderson burst in screaming, "This is a HOA property, every weapon I own is legal, locked in a federal vault," but she didn't care, just waved that red stamped letter in my face. Hey y'all, what would you do if someone tried to evict you from your own land? Drop a comment where you're watching from. Because what I discovered that night changed everything. The HOA had been sitting on a secret for 20 years, and they had no idea I was about to flip their whole world upside down. The morning started like any other Saturday. At the Thompson Ranch, the Texas sun was already climbing high, and my daughter Lily was bouncing with excitement for her first real shooting lesson, not with real bullets, of course. Just a little BB gun to teach her the fundamentals of safety and respect for firearms. Remember what Grandpa used to say? I told her, as I adjusted her stance, "Never let anyone steal your land with a signature, sweetheart." She nodded seriously, though I doubt she understood what those words meant. Hell, I didn't fully understand them myself. At the time, my grandfather had passed 6 months ago, leaving me this 50-acre ranch and a lifetime of cryptic advice that I was only beginning to decipher. I noticed the old photo on the fence post, the one of Grandpa standing next to a faded sign that read, "The Holdings," with the rest worn away by time. Strange how I'd never really paid attention to it before my wife Emma called from the porch, waving an envelope with that worried look she gets when bills arrive. But this wasn't a bill. The red, urgent eviction notice stamp made my blood run cold. I set the BB gun down, carefully reminding Lily to never touch it without an adult, and walked over to see what fresh hell the Riverbend Estates Homeowners Association had cooked up. This time, the letter was thick with legal jargon, but the message was crystal clear. I was being evicted for storing dangerous weapons in violation of HOA Regulation 15. 3. The letterhead caught my eye. Immediately there was a watermark, barely visible, unless you held it up to the light that read TH LLC Thompson Holdings. Why did that sound so familiar? My mind raced as I read through the accusations according to HOA President Patricia Henderson. My licensed firearm collection and professional training equipment constituted a clear and present danger to the community they were giving me. 30 days to vacate the property or face legal action. Emma's face had gone pale. "Marcus, they can't do this, can they? This is our home. Your grandfather built this place with his bare hands." I wanted to reassure her, but something wasn't adding up. How could the HOA evict me from land that had been in my family for 3 generations before I could process it all? A black Escalade pulled up our gravel driveway, kicking up dust like some kind of movie villain entrance. Out stepped Patricia Henderson herself, all 5'2" of bottled blonde fury, accompanied by Bradley Stevens, the HOA vice president, who also happened to own the biggest real estate company in town. Patricia's voice could probably strip paint when she got going. "Mr. Thompson, I trust you received our notice. This is a HOA property, and your blatant disregard for our safety regulations ends today." She actually said HOA property, like it was holy scripture. Bradley stood behind her, fidgeting with his phone and whispering something about the plan that Patricia quickly shushed. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger building in my chest, "I'm a licensed firearms instructor. I've been teaching gun safety for over 10 years. Everything I have is stored in a federally approved vault. What exactly is the problem here?" Patricia's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "The problem, Mr. Thompson, is that you're running some kind of weapons depot in a family neighborhood. Think of the children." She gestured dramatically toward my daughter, who was still standing by the fence watching the adults with wide eyes. The irony of using my own child as an example of endangered children while I was literally teaching her gun safety was not lost on me. Bradley leaned in to whisper something else to Patricia, and I caught the words investor and timeline. Patricia's eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite place. Greed, anticipation. Whatever it was, it made my skin crawl as they turned to leave. Patricia called over her shoulder, 30 days, Mr. Thompson, not a minute. More, this is a HOA property, and we will not tolerate threats to our community's safety. The Escalade peeled out, leaving another cloud of dust and a silence that felt heavy with foreboding. That's when I noticed old Walt Harrison, our 78-year-old neighbor, standing by our mailbox. He'd been watching the whole exchange, and the look on his weathered face was one I'd never seen before. Without a word, he walked up to me with surprising speed. For his age, grabbed my hand in both of his and pressed something cold and metallic into my palm. It was an old brass key, worn smooth with age. "Your grandfather left this for you," Walt said, his voice urgent and low. "Open it tonight before it's too late." Then he turned and hurried away, leaving me standing there with a key that felt like it weighed 1,000 OLB and more questions than I'd ever had in my life. The Riverbend Estates HOA meeting was held in Patricia Henderson's McMansion, a gaudy monument to new money that stuck out like a sore thumb among the modest ranch homes that made up most of our community. Emma and I arrived to find the place packed with our neighbors, most looking confused and some looking downright hostile. Patricia had clearly been busy spreading her version of events as we found seats near the back. I noticed something odd about all the HOA documents spread across the tables. Each one had that same faint watermark I'd seen on the eviction letter, THLLC, my grandfather's. Initials were TH, Thomas Henderson. No, wait, that was Patricia's last name, Thomas Harrison. No, that wasn't right either. The connection danced just out of reach of my consciousness, like a word on the tip of your tongue. Patricia called the meeting to order with all the pomp and circumstance of a Supreme Court session. She stood at her custom-built podium, designer heels clicking as she paced back and forth. "Ladies and gentlemen of Riverbend Estates, we face a clear and present danger in our midst. Marcus Thompson has turned his property into an arsenal, storing dangerous weapons that put all our lives at risk. This is a HOA property, and we have standards." She actually had a PowerPoint presentation. The woman had made a PowerPoint about me, slide after slide of grainy photos taken from the road, showing me carrying gun cases, teaching safety classes, and yes, that morning's lesson with Lily. Bless her heart, I whispered to Emma. She's performing like she's auditioning for a reality show. Emma squeezed my hand, warning me to keep quiet, but I could see she was fighting back a smile despite the seriousness of the situation. Dorothy Miller, a 65-year-old retiree whose roof I'd helped repair after last year's hailstorm, stood up shakily. "Now wait just a minute. Patricia, Marcus Thompson is a good man. He's helped half the people in this room at one time or another. He's never been anything but safe and responsible with his firearms." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and I felt a surge of gratitude for Dorothy's courage. But Robert Davis, a 70-year-old former accountant and Bradley's golf buddy, immediately jumped to his feet. Weapons, or weapons, I don't care how safe he claims to be. Do we want our grandchildren playing in a neighborhood with an arms dealer? The crowd erupted into arguments, neighbor turning against neighbor, exactly what Patricia had wanted. I stood up slowly, waiting for the chaos to die down. "Folks, if I could have a minute, I'm a licensed firearms instructor. With over 10 years of experience, every weapon I own is legally registered and stored in a vault that exceeds federal requirements. I teach safety courses to law enforcement military personnel and, yes, responsible citizens who want to protect their families. This isn't about safety, it's about control. Patricia's face twisted into an ugly sneer. Control. You want to talk about control while you're stockpiling weapons of war, Bradley, who had been unusually quiet suddenly, blurted out, "When Thompson's gone, the investors will pay triple market value for that land." The room went silent. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel, and Bradley's face went white as he realized what he'd just revealed. "I mean," Bradley stammered, trying to recover, "there would be interest in developing that land properly for the good of the community, but the damage was done." Several neighbors were now looking at Patricia and Bradley with suspicion. Patricia quickly called for a vote, her voice shrill, with barely contained panic, all in favor of evicting Marcus Thompson for violations of HOA Regulation 15.3 regarding dangerous weapons. 8 hands went up, mostly Patricia's inner circle, and a few neighbors who looked uncomfortable but intimidated all opposed 2 hands, Dorothy's, and surprisingly, old Walt Harrison's, who I hadn't even noticed in the corner motion. "Carries," Patricia announced triumphantly. "Mr. Thompson, you have 30 days to vacate. This is a HOA property." The meeting was breaking up in chaos when Walt suddenly stood, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife stop. Everyone froze. Walt was shaking, but his voice was clear and strong. "Patricia Henderson, or should I call you Marie Watson?" The effect was immediate and dramatic. Patricia's face went from triumphant to terrified. In a heartbeat, the wireless microphone slipped from her hands and hit the floor with an ear-splitting shriek of feedback. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out. Walt turned to me, his eyes urgent. "Open that safe." Sudden right now, he didn't wait for my response, just pushed through the stunned crowd and disappeared into the night. Patricia stood frozen at her podium, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. The name Marie Watson hung in the air like a loaded gun, and I had the feeling that everything was about to change. Emma and I drove home in tense silence, both of us processing what had just happened. "Marie Watson," Emma finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "Who the hell is Marie Watson?" I shook my head, still seeing Patricia's terrified face in my mind. "I don't know, but did you see how she reacted? She looked like she'd seen a ghost. We were barely through the door when Emma rounded on me, tears in her eye. "Marcus, I'm scared. What if the kids get bullied because of this? What if they call us the crazy gun family?" I pulled her close, feeling her shake against me. "Hey, we're going to figure this out. Grandpa always said this land was special. Maybe it's time we found out why." The safe was in Grandpa's old study, a heavy Mosler from the 1940s that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast. The key Walt had given me was worn smooth, and my hands trembled as I inserted it into the lock. The tumblers clicked with well-oiled precision, and the massive door swung open to reveal files, dozens of manila folders, photographs, and at the center of it all, a modern digital tablet in a sealed plastic. "Bag labeled Operation Homecoming, play me first." I powered on the tablet, and my grandfather's face filled the screen. He looked tired but determined, and I realized this must have been recorded shortly before his death. "Marcus," his recorded voice began, "if you're watching this, then they have shown their hand. Patricia Henderson has a dark past. Son, whatever she's accusing you of, know that it's all part of their plan to steal our land. Don't let anyone take your land with a signature boy. Fight them." With their own rules, the video continued, and each word hit me like a physical blow. 20 years ago, I structured a deal that would protect our family's legacy, the HOA that Patricia runs. They don't own the land their houses sit on. Marcus, they're renters. Thompson Holdings, LLC, that's us. Son, that's our family company. I've been collecting rent through a trust to keep it hidden, waiting for the right moment, waiting for them to overplay their hand. I sank into Grandpa's old leather chair, my mind reeling. Emma gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Wait, what, we own their land, the whole Riverbend estates?" I nodded numbly, still processing. Looks like 30 of our 50 acres. Grandpa leased it to them 20 years ago. Through this shell company, the tablet had more files, including a scanned copy of the original lease agreement. I read through it carefully, my experience with contracts from the gun shop helping me pass the legal language. There it was, in black and white. Thompson Holdings, LLC, owned the land, and the HOA was leasing it for $100 per year, with automatic renewal unless I read the clause 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly, unless the HOA or its representatives engage in harassment, intimidation, or illegal acts against the landowner or their heirs. "Grandpa, you clever bastard!" He'd built in a poison pill, and Patricia had just swallowed it whole. "Honey," Emma breathed, "this changes everything." But why didn't Grandpa ever tell us I was about to answer when my phone rang? Patricia's name flashed on the screen, Mr. Thompson. Her voice was back to its usual aggressive tone, though I could hear a slight tremor underneath. "I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but you have 24 hours to remove those weapons and vacate the property. This is a HOA property, and I will have you forcibly removed if necessary." She hung up before I could respond. I looked at Emma, then back at the tablet. "Grandpa," I said to the empty room, "I understand now they're trying to steal our land with signatures and legal threats, but they don't know. We hold all the cards." The video had paused on a final frame, showing a younger Patricia standing next to a man I didn't recognize, but there was something about her expression, something predatory and cold, that made me shiver. The safe contained more than just documents. There were photographs, news clippings from the early 2000s, and a police report with several pages blacked out. One name kept appearing: Marie Watson, wanted for fraud, and connection to a suspicious death in Dallas. I spread everything out on Grandpa's desk, trying to piece together the puzzle. Emma found the connection first. "Marcus, look at this photo from 2003, that woman in the background. Doesn't she look familiar?" I studied the grainy newspaper photo from a Dallas Society page. There, barely visible in the crowd at some charity gala, was a woman who looked remarkably like a younger Patricia Henderson, or should I say, Marie Watson. The tablet suddenly chimed, and a new video file appeared. Had Grandpa programmed it to unlock in sequence? His face appeared again, looking even more serious. "Marcus, if you're watching this part, then Patricia has revealed herself. You need to know something, son. 20 years ago, that woman destroyed my best friend's life. Walt Harrison's father took his own life after she conned him out of his life savings. I've spent 2 decades setting this trap, waiting for her to feel safe enough to show her true colors, the guns, son." He couldn't resist going after the guns. It's the perfect excuse for someone who wants to steal land. She thinks she's evicting you, but she's really walking into a trap. 20 years in the making. And Marcus, Walt's father, he was my partner. We were investigating her together when he died. She's got blood on her hands, boy. Don't let her get away with it this time. I sat at our kitchen table the next morning, staring at the evidence spread before me, while Emma made coffee, the weight of what we'd discovered pressed down on my shoulders like a physical thing. "Should we go public with this?" I asked, running my hand through my hair. "The whole neighborhood will panic when they find out they don't actually own their land." Emma set a steaming mug in front of me, her blogger instincts already kicking into high gear. Marcus, they tried to evict you for legally owning guns. They're using your profession against you to steal our heritage time to fight back. Honey, let me work my magic. I hesitated, knowing that once we revealed the truth, there would be no going back. But then I remembered Grandpa's words about not letting anyone steal land with signatures, and my resolve hardened. Emma spent the morning crafting what she called a truth bomb for her food blog, which had over 50 0 local followers. While she usually wrote about the best barbecue joints and family recipes, she occasionally tackled community issues. They want to evict us for legal guns. The headline read, within 2 hours, it had 300,000 views, and climbing the comment section exploded with support using hashtags like legal guns, legal rights, and Stand with Thompson. I set up security cameras around the property, having a feeling we'd need evidence of whatever came next. Sure enough, around noon, a convoy of vehicles roared up our driveway, Patricia's Escalade 2 rental vans, and what looked like a security company car. Patricia had brought her own private enforcement squad, but I was ready for them. Instead of meeting hostility with hostility, I had the smoker going, filling the air with the smell of authentic Texas barbecue. Our neighbors started showing up, too curious about the commotion, and drawn by Emma's viral post, Patricia stepped out of her vehicle, her face twisted with rage. Clear the area, she shrieked at the gathering crowd. This is an eviction enforcement action. This man is storing dangerous weapons and poses a threat to our community. This is a HOA property. I smiled, flipping brisketses on the grill. Mom, would you like some barbecue? I've got plenty for everyone, including your enforcement team. The security guards looked confused, clearly not prepared for a peaceful barbecue. Instead of an armed standoff, one of them actually started moving toward the food table before Patricia's glare stopped him cold. You think this is funny? Patricia snarled. Storming up to me, you're harboring an arsenal. This is a HOA property, and I have every right to protect it. I kept my voice calm and steady. Ma'am, my guns are locked up, tighter than Fort Knox, all legal, all registered, all secure. But speaking of locked up, are your property documents locked up properly? You know, the ones showing who really owns this land. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly, too quickly. She hadn't understood the implication yet. Good. Let her dig her hole deeper. The cameras were rolling, and Emma was live streaming to her followers. Patricia, in her fury, didn't notice until she physically shoved Emma away from the grill. Get that camera out of my face, she screamed. That was the mistake. I've been waiting for assault on camera with hundreds of thousands of witnesses. Dorothy Miller, who'd been watching from her car, immediately called 911. Yes, I'd like to report an assault in progress at the Thompson Ranch. The HOA president just attacked a pregnant woman. Emma wasn't pregnant, but bless Dorothy's heart for adding that detail. Within minutes, real police sirens wailed in the distance. Patricia's hired security guards suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere, scrambling back to their vehicles. Bradley Stevens, who'd been hiding in the Escalade, poked his head out. Patricia, maybe we should shut up, she snapped, but I could see the panic building in her eyes. I decided it was time, with the police pulling up, neighbors gathering, and cameras rolling. I stood on the porch and made my announcement. Y'all, I need to tell you something I just found out from my grandfather's papers that I'm the actual owner of the land Riverbend Estates sits on. Believe me, I'm just as shocked as you are. The HOA has been renting from my family's company for 20 years. The crowd erupted, questions, shouts, confusion. Patricia's face went from pale to purple to a shade I didn't know human skin could achieve. Emma, ever the social media genius, grinned at her phone Say hi to social media, HOA president. Shikchi Ho Karen is trending, but Patricia wasn't done as the police. Officers approached. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and made a frantic call. Code red. She screamed into the phone, "Burn everything, burn it all." Bradley's voice carried from the Escalade, high, and panicked. What but? The FBI is already... The line went dead. The lead police officer, a stern-faced woman named Officer Jack, looked very interested in that exchange, ma'am. "I'm going to need you to put the phone down and explain what you mean by burn everything." Patricia clutched her phone like a lifeline, her carefully styled hair coming undone. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm the HOA president. This man is a threat. He has guns, officer." Jack glanced at me, then at the barbecue, then at the crowd of supportive neighbors. "Sir, are you a licensed firearms owner?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Licensed instructor for 10 years. All weapons secured in a federal-grade vault. I can show you all my paperwork." Patricia made a sound like a stepped-on cat. "He's lying. This is a HOA property. I have eviction papers." Officer Jack looked tired, ma'am. "We've had multiple reports of you assaulting someone. We have a witness who called 911, and apparently there's video evidence. I'm going to need you to come with us." As they led Patricia away, she kept screaming about HOA property and her rights, but her words were lost in the sound of justice finally catching up. The crowd dispersed slowly, everyone talking in hushed tones about land, ownership, and what this meant for their homes. I noticed several people pulling out their property documents looking for that telltale Thulks watermark. Emma squeezed my hand. "You did it, honey. You stayed calm and let her hang herself." But I shook my head, watching the police car disappear down the road. "No, this isn't over, did you hear what she said? Burn everything. There's more to this story. And I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface." As if on cue, Walt Harrison appeared at my elbow, holding an old photograph. His hands were shaking, and there were tears in his eyes. It was time for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. The next morning, our quiet neighborhood had transformed into chaos. Cars lined every street as residents frantically searched through their property documents. I watched from my porch as Dorothy Miller sat on her front steps, clutching her deed with tears streaming down her face. My house could be gone. She kept saying, "Marcus, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you at first. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you stronger." Robert Davis, the man who'd called me an arms dealer just yesterday, stood in his driveway looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "If Thompson wants the land back, good Lord, we'll be ruined. The weight of holding 30 families, futures in my hands, pressed down on me. But I had to stay focused on the bigger picture. Patricia, or Marie, was still out there, and her burn everything commandee meant she had accomplices. Emma's live stream from yesterday had exploded beyond our wildest expectations. 100,000 viewers and climbing, with major news outlets picking up the story. She stood in our living room talking to her phone camera with the natural ease of someone born for this digital age. "Folks, my husband Marcus is a licensed firearms instructor. With 10 years of experience, the HOA tried to use his legal profession as an excuse to steal our family land. This isn't about guns, it's about greed and corruption." The comments flew by too fast to read, but the support was overwhelming. People from across the country were sharing similar HOA horror stories, turning our local drama into a national conversation about property rights and HOA overreach. I was in Grandpa's study searching through more documents when I decided to Google Marie Watson, Texas fraud, on a whim. The results made my blood run cold. Articles from 20 years ago filled my screen. Investment fraud, suspect, vanishes. Dallas business owner suicide linked to missing financial advisor Marie Watson, wanted for questions in multiple fraud cases. I clicked through, my heart pounding as I recognized younger versions of Patricia in the grainy photos, but it was one particular article that made me call Emma over. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a Dallas Morning News piece from 2004. Marie Watson disappeared right after William Harrison's death. William Harrison, that's got to be Walt's father. Emma read over my shoulder, her hand gripping mine tightly. "Marcus, she didn't just con him according to this. She was the last person seen with him before he—" "Oh, God!" Our investigation was interrupted by sirens. Lots of them, federal vehicles, swept into Riverbend Estates like an invading army through the window. I watched FBI agents surround Bradley Stevens' house. He came out in handcuffs, sobbing and pointing toward Patricia's McMansion. Apparently, the code red call had triggered something bigger than a local police response word, spread quickly through our neighborhood. Network Bradley had been taking bribes from mysterious investors, promising them cheap land once the gun nut was evicted. The FBI had been investigating him for months, and Patricia's panicked call had given them the final evidence they needed. But Patricia herself was nowhere to be found. She'd made bail the previous evening and promptly vanished, that is, until Emma spotted her on our security cameras around 3 in the afternoon. She was creeping through our back acre, heading toward the old barn where I stored farming equipment. Marcus, Emma called. "She's here, she's trying to do something to the barn." We rushed outside to find Patricia dousing the wooden structure with gasoline. Her designer clothes ruined her perfectly styled hair. Wild, she looked like a completely different person. Desperate, dangerous, unhinged. "You ruined everything," she screamed when she saw us. 20 years I've built this life. 20 years of being Patricia Henderson, respected, president of the HOA. This is my property, my kingdom. She fumbled with a lighter, but her hands were shaking too badly in her desperation to flee. When she heard sirens approaching, she stumbled backward, her expensive heels catching in a gopher hole. The crack of her heel breaking was oddly satisfying, and she went down hard, gasoline splashing over her designer outfit. The police arrived just as she was struggling to her feet, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Patricia Henderson, you're under arrest for attempted arson, vandalism and violation of bail conditions," Officer Jack announced, looking thoroughly unsatisfied with having to arrest the same person twice in 2 days. Patricia fought like a wild cat as they cuffed her. "This is my HOA property," she shrieked. "I made this place respectable. I saved it from people like him." As they dragged her away, she kept screaming about her rights, her property, her kingdom. It would have been pitiful if she hadn't tried to burn down my barn. The voiceover in my head was Grandpa's. Sometimes the worst criminals are the ones who hide behind respectability. Marcus, they think their clean clothes and fancy titles make them untouchable. I thought it was over. Patricia was in custody. Bradley was cooperating with the FBI, and the truth about land ownership was out. But Walt Harrison had one more bomb to drop. He arrived at my door that evening, carrying a manila envelope and that old photograph I'd glimpsed before his weathered hands trembled as he handed it to me. "Marcus, you need to see this." I couldn't say anything before too dangerous, but now he showed me the photo, a much younger Patricia, standing next to a distinguished-looking man in a business suit. "That's my father, William Harrison, one day before he died. And look at the reflection in the window behind them." I squinted at the photo, then felt my heart skip there, barely visible in the glass. Reflection was a familiar figure holding the camera, is that? Walt nodded, tears flowing freely. "Now your grandfather, he was there, he saw what happened. Marie Patricia. She didn't just con my father, your grandfather witnessed the whole thing. He's been planning this trap for 20 years, waiting for her to feel safe enough to show her true nature." The federal courthouse in Austin was packed for Patricia Henderson's trial. Marie Watson, as the prosecutors insisted on calling her, sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her gone, was the imperious HOA president who terrorized a neighborhood in her place sat a frightened woman watching 20 years of lies crumble around her. I adjusted my tie nervously, waiting to be called as a witness. Emma squeezed my hand in the gallery, surrounded by our Riverbend neighbors who'd come to see justice serve the prosecution, had built an airtight case, but they'd saved their biggest surprise for today. Walt Harrison took the stand. First, his voice steady. Despite his age, he carried a sealed envelope that he'd kept in a safety deposit box for 2 decades. "My name is Walter Harrison," he began, "and I've been waiting 20 years to tell this story." The prosecutor guided Walt through his testimony carefully. "Mr. Harrison, please tell the court about your father's final day." Walt's voice cracked slightly. My father, William Harrison, was a successful businessman who'd built his company from nothing. In 2004, he met Marie Watson at an investment seminar. She promised to help him expand internationally, said she had connections in Europe. He trusted her. The courtroom was silent, except for the court reporter's keys clicking. She convinced him to liquidate everything, his business, his retirement, even our family home, said it was necessary for the international expansion. The last time I saw him alive, he was going to meet her to sign the final papers. Your grandfather, Thomas Thompson, went with him. Dad didn't trust her completely and wanted a witness. Patricia's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. This was directly relevant to establishing pattern and motive. Walt continued, his voice growing stronger. Thomas Thompson was my father's best friend and business partner. He had a bad feeling about Marie and insisted on documenting everything. That's why he was there with a camera after my father signed the papers. Marie revealed the truth. There was no international expansion. The money was already gone, transferred to offshore accounts. My father realized he'd lost everything. Thomas tried to stop him, but Walt paused, composing himself. My father went to the parking garage roof. He jumped. Thomas saw it happen. He saw Marie watching from her car, and when the police arrived, she was already gone, vanished like smoke. The photograph was entered into evidence, Patricia young and smiling next to William Harrison with Thomas Thompson's reflection in the window. The metadata proved it was taken the day William died. The prosecutor then called me to the stand. I testified about finding the documents, the land ownership, Patricia's attempts to evict me, but the real bombshell came when they played the second part of Grandpa's video, the one that had been password protected until the FBI cracked it. Grandpa's face filled the courtroom's screen. My name is Thomas Thompson, and I'm recording this on January 15th, 2024. I'm dying of cancer, and I need to ensure justice is served. 20 years ago, I watched Marie Watson drive my best friend to suicide. I tried to stop her, but she disappeared before police could act. I've spent 2 decades tracking her, and I finally found her living as Patricia Henderson in the community built on my family land. The courtroom gasped collectively. Even the judge leaned forward. Grandpa's video continued. I structured the land lease specifically to trap her. I knew her greed would eventually surface. She couldn't resist the power of being HOA, president controlling others' lives. I waited, documenting everything, building a case. The guns were perfect. Bait. Marie always hated firearms because they represented power she couldn't control through manipulation. I knew she'd go after my grandsons. Legal collection eventually. Every piece of this plan was designed to make her reveal herself, to make her feel safe enough to show her true nature. The harassment clause in the lease agreement was my insurance policy. Once she moved against my family, she'd lose everything, just like William Harrison did. The video paused. Then Grandpa looked directly at the camera. Marie, if you're watching this in court, know that William's death didn't go unwitnessed. You thought you got away with it, But justice took 20 years to arrive. Patricia suddenly erupted from her seat. You don't understand. This was supposed to be my property, my community. I built Patricia Henderson from nothing I made. Riverbend Estates, respectable. The Baifs moved to respectable. But she wasn't done. Her lawyer tried desperately to quiet her. But 20 years of lies had finally broken the dam. William Harrison was weak. He was going to waste that money on pointless expansion when I could have made us both rich. He chose death. Over opportunity, the judge banged his gavel, threatening contempt, but Patricia had completely lost control. And yes, I wanted Thompson's land. Do you know what? Developers would pay for 50 acres, millions. I deserved it, after all I'd done for that. Community, this is my hoe. The prosecutor smiled slightly. Sometimes the best conviction comes from the defendant's own mouth, but Patricia had one final card to play as the Baifs moved in. She laughed maniacally. You think you've won? Check your bank. Accounts, all of you, 20 years. As HOA president gave me access to everything, automatic, payment authorizations, account numbers, social security numbers, for background checks. If I'm going down, you're all coming with me. The courtroom erupted in chaos. As people frantically pulled out phones, Dorothy Miller's scream cut through the noise. My retirement, it's gone. Others joined in. Savings accounts emptied, checking accounts drained. Patricia had triggered some kind of financial doomsday plan. The FBI agents in the courtroom immediately got on their phones, but the damage was spreading in her desperation. Patricia had just confessed to federal wire fraud affecting hundreds of accounts. The judge ordered the courtroom sealed, and what had been a simple trial became a federal financial crime scene. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of federal agents, frozen bank accounts, and financial forensics teams working around the clock. But here's the thing about Patricia, or Marie. She was clever, but not as clever as she thought. The FBI's cybercrime unit discovered she'd set up the theft months ago, creating a complex web of automatic transfers triggered by a specific code phrase sent from her phone. What she didn't know was that modern banking systems have safeguards against exactly this kind of mass fraud. Within 4 days, every penny was recovered and returned. The relief in Dorothy Miller's voice when she called to confirm her retirement was safe brought tears to my eyes. Marcus, I can't thank you enough. If you hadn't exposed her, she might have gotten away with it all. Patricia Marie Watson Henderson received 20 years in federal prison for murder, wire fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other charges. Bradley Stevens got 8 years for his part in the bribery and corruption scheme. The mysterious investors turned out to be a shell company. Patricia controlled planning to buy the land cheap and flip it for millions. During sentencing, Patricia maintained her delusions. To the end, this is my property. I made Riverbend Estates. What it is, you're all nothing without me. The judge's response was measured but firm. Miss Watson, the only property you'll be managing for the next 2 decades is a 6-8 cell. As they led her away in shackles, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the waste of a life spent running from the truth. A week later, I called a community meeting at the ranch. Every family from Riverbend Estates showed up, anxiety written on their faces. They knew I held their futures in my hands. 30 families who'd built their lives on land they just discovered they didn't own. I stood on my porch, looking out at neighbors who'd become friends through this ordeal. I ain't going to evict nobody, I said, letting my Texas drawl come through strong. Let's make this right, y'all. The relief was palpable, but I wasn't done. My grandfather charged $100 a year for this land lease. Patricia pocketed that money and told y'all it was going to HOA fees. Well, I'm keeping Grandpa's rate $100 a year, fair and square. But this time, we're doing everything transparent and legal. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. Dorothy Miller was crying again, but happy tears. This time, Marcus, I don't understand that land must be worth millions. Why would you? I thought about how to explain it, because Grandpa didn't set this trap for money, he did it for justice. And because y'all are my neighbors, this land ain't for sale, it's home. A lawyer had approached me that morning, representing a development company. They'd offered $10 million cash for the whole 50 acres. I'd turned them down without hesitation. Some things are worth more than money, and the look on my neighbors' faces proved I'd made the right choice. Besides, I added, with a grin, I've got some ideas about how we can make this community even better. The transformation of Riverbend Estates over the following months was something to behold. We established a new HOA with Walt Harrison as our advisory chairman and Dorothy Miller as president. The first order of business was transparency. Every meeting was public, every financial transaction documented and available for review. Robert Davis, the man who'd once called me an arms dealer, approached me one afternoon with his hat literally in his hand. Marcus, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, about the guns, about everything. I let fear and Patricia's manipulation cloud my judgment. Is there any chance would you consider teaching gun safety? I realize now that ignorance is more dangerous than knowledge. That's how the Thompson Ranch Safety Academy was born. What started as informal lessons for a few neighbors grew into a certified training facility. 6 months later, Riverbend Estates had been featured in 3 national magazines as America's safest community, and the neighborhood that fought back crime in our area dropped to near zero. Turns out criminals don't like targeting neighborhoods where 70% of law-abiding citizens are trained in firearm safety and self-defense. Robert Davis became one of my best students, earning his concealed carry license and becoming a volunteer safety instructor. Dorothy Miller, at 65, decided she wanted to learn. Too, if I'm going to be HOA president, she said, I should understand what I'm governing. Watching her handle a .22 caliber pistol with confidence and skill was one of my prouder moments as an instructor. Even more satisfying was seeing our community come together, no longer divided by fear and manipulation. Emma's Food blog had evolved into a community news platform with 500,000 subscribers. She documented our journey from a neighborhood torn apart by corruption to one united by trust and mutual respect. Her post, titled "How My Husband's Guns Saved Our Neighborhood," went viral, sparking national conversations about Second Amendment rights, property law, and the dangers of unchecked HOA power. We received letters from communities across America thanking us for inspiring them to stand up against their own HOA tyranny. One letter particularly touched me, from a veteran in Ohio whose HOA had tried to ban him from flying the American flag. Your story gave me the courage to fight back. He wrote, I won, and our whole neighborhood now flies flags proudly. I stood in Grandpa's study one quiet evening, looking at his photograph on the wall. We got her, Grandpa, I whispered. Mission complete. William Harrison can rest in peace now. I'd had the photo from Walt, enlarged and framed, Grandpa standing next to his friend William, both men smiling, taken years before Marie Watson destroyed their lives. Below it hung Grandpa's favorite saying, carved into a piece of mesquite wood. Don't let anyone steal your land, with a signature next to it. I'd added my own, and sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword. The sound of laughter drifted in from outside, where Emma was teaching her weekend cooking class. Life was good at the Thompson Ranch, in the federal prison in Austin. Patricia Marie Watson Henderson sat in her cell, watching the small television. During her allotted hour, the local news was doing a feature on Riverbend Estates, showing happy families at the Thompson Ranch Safety Academy's annual barbecue fundraiser. She watched Marcus teaching a child proper shooting stance While Emma served her famous brisket to a line of smiling neighbors, the reporter mentioned how crime had dropped to virtually zero, how property values had increased 30%, how the community had become a model for responsible gun ownership and transparent governance. The camera panned over a sign at the ranch entrance, Thompson Ranch, where Second Amendment rights and community values meet. Patricia turned away from the screen, facing 20 years of walls and regret for someone who'd spent 2 decades claiming this is my HOA property. The irony of her current 668 property wasn't lost on her back at the ranch. As the sun set over our 50 acres, I watched our community, my grandfather's legacy, thrive. Children played safely while their parents socialized, many with concealed carry permits they'd earned. Through proper training, Walter enemies had become friends, united by shared experience and mutual respect. Walt Harrison, now 80 and still sharp as a tack, sat with Dorothy Miller planning the next community improvement project. Robert Davis was teaching a group of teenagers about firearm safety, emphasizing responsibility over fear. Emma found me on the porch, sliding her arm around my waist. "You know what the best part is?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" She smiled, gesturing at the peaceful scene before us. Remember when Patricia screamed, "This is a HOA property!" Over and over I chuckled. How could I forget? Emma's smile widened. Well, she was wrong. This isn't just a HOA property. It's our home, all of ours, and thanks to you and your grandfather, it always will be. She was right in trying to steal our land. Patricia had instead helped us build something stronger than property lines or HOA regulations. We'd built a real community, one where the Second Amendment protected the First, where neighbors looked out for each other, and where no one would ever again try to steal land with a signature. Remember, y'all? I called out to the gathering, raising my sweet tea in a toast. This ain't just a HOA property, it's our home. The cheer that went up echoed across the Texas hills, carrying with it the sound of freedom, justice, and a community reborn. Grandpa would have been proud.